Hello and welcome to Voices of BlueScope, the podcast where we meet the people who work behind the scenes at BlueScope to create strength every day. I'm your host, Martin Feld. Thank you for listening. In this episode, we meet 4 people at the Port Kembla Steelworks in Australia who are working in electrical and mechanical roles. Aidan Grindle, Bradley Heino, Naomi Alves and Stuart Kerr are all at different stages of their careers, but they each have one thing in common. They all started at BlueScope as apprentices. We chat to each of them to understand what it means to train as an apprentice or learn a trade, and where it has taken them. First, we meet Aidan, who works in a mechanical maintenance role. He explains the need to multitask across various processes and projects to support Port Kembla's 24/7 steelmaking operations.
So currently we're standing in the BOS, basic oxidising steelmaking. This is where we get the raw iron from the blast furnace and we start turning it into steel. So we start charging with scrap steel, and then the raw iron from the blast furnace gets pretty much dumped on top of that, and that's when all the magic happens.
All the magic happens?
All the magic.
Fantastic. So when you use a word like magic, I assume you enjoy working in this area. What's it like to be in this part of the steelworks?
It's definitely interesting. There's a lot going on, a lot of fire and sparks, I suppose, but no, it's pretty interesting. Work across a variety of different departments, so I get a variety of different jobs that come through, and just the variety is what keeps me in the job, I suppose. It keeps me excited.
So what is your role exactly that allows you to have such variety and work across different areas?
So my current role is on shift maintenance. So we run with a pretty small crew of 3 mechanical fitters and 3 electrical tradespersons and 1 team leader. So pretty much we are on call 24/7. We do 4 12-hour shifts, 2 days, 2 nights. Once something happens with operations will give us a call saying this is what's happened, can you please have a look? And from there we'll go and have a look and find out what actually went wrong and try and repair it as best as we can.
Is it stressful to work in maintenance? Because when I hear a word like maintenance and you have to be on call like that, it sounds like you have to be a jack of all trades and a master of everything.
Yeah, so it definitely keeps you on your toes. So because you're not set in one department and you're spread out across, various, there's no 2 machines the same really. Once you get the call and you go there, and you have to think on your feet, try and figure out what actually went wrong, start with your troubleshooting, and then hopefully diagnose what actually went wrong so that way you can fix it.
Now I understand that you were an apprentice here in Port Kembla until recently. Can you tell us about that path, how you started and what brought you to this position?
Yeah, so what got me on the path was I got sick of my day-to-day job that I was in, and noticed that BlueScope was hiring apprentices. So like everyone, I submitted my application to BlueScope, and then it was a 5-stage process, and I was one of the lucky ones in the end. And then from there on, I started at TAFE for 2 months. 2 months you do everything from your basic hand tools all the way up to your basic fitting and machining, and then from there that's when they release you to site. Once you go from site, you spend anywhere between 6 to 12 months in a different department every time, and then that way it gives you a variety and a really good insight to the plant.
And what were you doing before you joined as an apprentice?
So before I started my apprenticeship, I was a scaffolder rigger for a local company, and I'd been working with them for nearly 6 years, and then just didn't feel like it was for me, so I started looking elsewhere, and lucky enough I fell into an apprenticeship with BlueScope.
When you were doing your apprenticeship, what kinds of tasks were you doing day to day? What things were you learning in conjunction with TAFE?
So the day-to-day jobs as an apprentice, you obviously start with your smaller ones and work your way up. So your smaller jobs might be basic servicing of gearbox and machines. So it might be just as simple as changing oil or doing a bit of greasing and stuff like that. So until you get your plant knowledge, and then once you build up that plant knowledge, then you go into your main mainstream where you could be fitting major bearings, servicing major components of machine like hydraulics and pneumatic systems and stuff like that. So that's where it starts getting really interesting and exciting. You have to think a lot more on your feet, and yeah.
Perfect. So now that you've finished the apprenticeship and you've explained the variety of tasks that you have to do, is there a particular type of work here that you really enjoy doing? Some sort of problem solving or hands-on task that you enjoy more than the others?
Yeah, so the main thing I like is the whole fixing aspect of it, being able to break something down, figure out how it works, find out what actually went wrong, and being able to diagnose that problem and then actually fix it. So sometimes they're a simple job, and it might be just as simple as, cleaning a machine out, it got a bit too much dirt for the sensors, and then putting it back into service. Sometimes you have major failures, and then that's when it gets really interesting, because you've got to source what spare parts you need, what tooling you need, and it could be stripping a gearbox down, pulling it out off a crane, and you're hanging a few stories off the ground from a crane, and and then you've got to try and get that gearbox off that crane and then back into service and get it underway as soon as possible. Yeah, that's what keeps me interested. Keeps the brain working, I suppose, but yeah, that's what keeps me interested.
We meet a lot of people across BlueScope with very different roles, but where do you see yourself fitting in that process of making?
That's an interesting question. I suppose the important part to making steel is actually having a functioning plant. So for as long as the plant's running, we're making steel, and if something goes wrong, my job is then to help get in there and fix that, and that's where I think that's a very important key role, because if you don't have someone here fixing the plant, then the plant doesn't run, you don't make steel, and so just a big snowball effect. So I think my role as a maintenance fitter is quite key. So
really you're making the making possible?
Yeah, definitely assisting that. So there's definitely a very wide range of knowledge in the plant from the amount of people that work here. I'm pretty lucky to be with a very experienced crew, and they've assisted me in my transition from my apprenticeship into my trade role now. So
for anyone who's considering applying for a role at BlueScope, maybe becoming an apprentice just like you were, what pearls of wisdom or pieces of advice would you give if they're thinking about it?
My biggest thing, looking back now, was the whole maintenance factor of being able to strip something down and fix it under my own power. It was the biggest thing to me. It gives me a good feeling at the end of the day. Anyone that in that same position that likes fixing things, especially in the mechanical aspect, I definitely think this is the best place because of the variety you're going to get. It's not your same 9-to-5 job where you're pulling a car apart and putting it back together. We're playing with a lot bigger components, a lot more machineries around, a lot more moving parts, and it's just your big heavy industry, which is more exciting.
Next up, we speak with Bradley. He completed an electrical apprenticeship and elaborates on the challenging task of keeping power flowing in such a gigantic integrated facility, simultaneously using older and newer technologies.
So my role is a power control officer. So our purpose is to make sure everyone in the steelworks has power, pretty much. So we're trying to make sure everyone has reliable power, make sure the power's the right voltage for what they need. Also deal with anything that trips off.
So we're talking about integrated steelworks here, lots of different systems working together. Is that stressful, providing power to all of these different places? What's it like? What's the experience?
Occasionally it can be stressful, especially when things start going wrong. People really want their power back because people want to make sure they're making steel. So it can be stressful when everyone starts ringing up at the same time, but it's part of the job.
Now this looks like a really interesting room. I can see lots of different dials, switches, screens. Can you tell us a little bit about the space that we're in and the different technology that's around us?
This building has been around for a long time, serving the same purpose. The tiles on the wall represent the older way of doing it. We have analog ammeters and voltmeters that give us instantaneous readings. Back in the day, that's how we used to switch our network as well, so we could open and close some switches from that mimic panel. Today, this is more just kind of symbolic of our network, and the instantaneous values are still nice. Through the computers, we have a delay, which is not ideal, but you're always going to have that with computers. And behind us is the digital version, which is the newer way of monitoring and controlling our network.
So is it a bit of a mental leap to try to work between these two different eras of technology in the same room?
Not really. It was easier for me, getting trained up on both of them, because when I got trained, both were here. So it was easier to utilise both of them.
A bit more about yourself. When did you start with BlueScope, and what were you doing here when you arrived?
Yeah, so I started my apprenticeship in 2014, and I went to Spring Hill Cranes, then the electrical shop, the strip mill services, and then the BOS, followed by high voltage. I then became a tradesperson in high voltage, and then moved up to power control. The steelworks is a really interesting place because there are so many things in the steelworks that you're never going to see outside the steelworks. Some of the older technology you'll never see again, and some of the newer technology you might never see again. So it's really the only place where you get to see everything.
That integrated theme again, everything is here if you want to experience it. Tell us a little bit more about your apprenticeship experience. So you said you were doing high voltage, so that's electrical work. That's why you're wearing orange for anyone who's unsure about the colour difference.
Yeah, this is fire rated, so especially when we're switching, we do up our collars. We don't want any exposed skin to potentially be burnt, so we wear face shields and leather gloves.
That makes sense. Safety first.
Yeah.
Going through, I assume that there was some rotation. What's the experience for someone coming in, starting off as an apprentice at BlueScope?
The rotation scheme is really good because you really do get exposed to everything, from maintaining a crane to installing a light to doing high voltage work. It's a really broad range of work, which a lot of people outside the steelworks don't get, whereas this is probably as broad as you can get.
Okay. And what was one of your favourite things about being an apprentice? Is there something that you learned particularly, or a task that you started to perform? Particularly
in the early days, the rapid knowledge that you started to develop was really fascinating, especially to experience. You went from a topic that you hardly knew anything about to having a very vast understanding in about a space of a year. So that learning curve was really interesting. The workplace is different, and you run into a lot of different people, a lot of different personalities. Almost everyone is unreal. A lot of them are really very good with apprentices. They understand that there's limitations and help you get to the point in which you need to be to do your job. I can't speak highly enough of the tradespeople here.
Where do you see yourself fitting in that world of making things?
Being a Sparky, we never really make anything, but we enable the making. So here we give the power to the strip mill so they can roll, and the power to the BOS so they can tilt their furnace. So we're just enabling everyone else to do it, but it's an important step. Without us, it doesn't happen.
To wrap things up, for people who are considering becoming an apprentice, whether it's in the electrical field or otherwise, what would you say to them if they're considering a workplace like BlueScope?
When I was at high school, everyone kind of just assumed the next step was university, but going into a trade is a very doable option, and it's unreal. And if you want to go to uni after you get a trade, you can do that.
It's time to meet Naomi, a maintenance team leader who also completed an electrical apprenticeship. In 2018, she was selected as the Apprentice of the Year at the HVTC Excellence Awards in Newcastle. She shares her enthusiasm for manufacturing and the value of learning new skills.
So currently we're in Stillhaven, so it's a little bit separate from the main Port Kembla Steelworks. We're a little bit up the road, but we're in electrical services and within the high voltage department within electrical services.
So what's the purpose of this area exactly? Where does it fit within the broader integrated facility?
BlueScope as a whole, it operates as a lot of little businesses almost inside a big business in conjunction with each other to help the operation. Electrical services, we do a lot of maintenance around site with varying degrees. So we have 4 sections here. We have building services, we have the electrical shop, which do motors for and around site for the process, instrumentation and high voltage. So the 4 of us, we do site-wide maintenance in order to keep the plant running.
Fantastic. And what's your exact role here today?
So I've just been promoted. I'm currently the high voltage maintenance team leader here within electrical services, and been filling this role for a couple of weeks now, and been within high voltage for 4 years or so, which has been a wonderful experience.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
What was the journey that led up to this point? of you taking this role? I understand that you started as an apprentice.
I started as a first-year apprentice through the Hunter Valley Training Company in 2014. The first 2 months of that was at TAFE doing a block release course. From there, we were brought out to the Steelworks, and throughout my apprenticeship was able to go around different departments and different sections and learn different operations around BlueScope. The good part of that is learn fundamentally how the business runs as a whole, able to learn from a variety of different tradespeople and able to learn a variety of different techniques and different sides of electricity, and further develop myself to become a licensed electrician.
And was the experience as you expected when you were doing that apprenticeship?
I don't know what I expected before coming in, and I don't think anyone could ever realistically know what they're coming into, but from the minute I came onto site, I loved every single ounce of it. It was just so much fun. The work's hard, the work's dirty, but the people that I'm working with, it's a diverse workplace, so I get to meet new people that I wouldn't typically ever meet. I get to learn things that I'd never see myself and complete things that I'd never see myself completing. So as a whole, it's been the most wonderful thing I have ever, and the best decision I've ever made.
Brilliant.
So the wonderful thing is you're learning electricity for the first time. So for me, when I was learning it at TAFE and able to learn what I took from TAFE coming to work and learning it at work, it seemed like magic. It was just such a foreign concept, and being a part, especially for such a big industry, and the more you hear, the more you realise every little bit counts, and every single person has their role within creating the business. So being an apprentice and being a part of that, no matter how small your role is, you have these tasks you've got to go complete. Just being a part and able to, perform maintenance or perform new installations, and just collectively everyone working together, and you see the end result going around the steelworks, the different departments. You go to the strip mill and you see the coils. The apprentices at the strip mill know that they've had a part to play in the steelmaking process.
As you did that apprenticeship, it seems like you had a really good impression of what you were doing and how that contributed to that process. Is that right?
With my apprenticeship, and especially going around the different sections, you get to see different parts of plant, and that you get to learn the different processes. So I'll use an example. As a third-year apprentice, I went to the blast furnace, and the blast furnace manufactures iron. So you get to see the process of the raw materials coming from the center plant and raw materials. So iron ore coming in its finest form, and you see it, and you see this actual iron getting made, and you see it coming out as molten iron at the bottom of the blast furnace, and just the whole process, it's just absolutely wonderful. And so I was there for 12 months, and in those 12 months learned a lot about the engineering behind it and how it's made, why it's made, and why we do the things we do, which is wonderful. And that's just an example of 12 months of my apprenticeship. Every different place you go to, you learn a whole new diverse role in a diverse workplace. It's wonderful.
For people who are thinking about joining BlueScope as an apprentice, whether in the electrical field like you or elsewhere, what's the one piece of advice that you would give to them if they're considering applying, or maybe have their own doubts or questions?
Ultimately, if you want to do it, do it. So a lot of people have their own inhibitions and they think I'm unable to do this, or for whatever reasons they hold to their own. Entering into the workforce, it was difficult for me to get my foot in the door, but with BlueScope, when I applied through Hunter Valley Training Company, they just embraced me with wide arms. Everything I wanted to learn, they taught me. I had no hand skills, I didn't know how to use tools, and they've taught me that whole process. Ultimately going in, I didn't know even how I was going to survive with that, and ultimately if I can do it, I think anyone can do it. The really thing that you need to take into that is a can-do attitude. As long as you have the enthusiasm, you want to learn, and you want to be there, the business as a whole will collectively help teach you and develop you and create a beautiful, wonderful group of tradespeople.
Last but not least, we chat with Stuart, who started as a mechanical apprentice and in 2020 celebrated 35 years of working at the Port Kembla Steelworks. Today, he is an assets manager at the basic oxygen steelmaking furnaces and has the opportunity to interview and work with new apprentices.
We're standing on the BOS operating floor and we're currently making a heated steel. It's actually number 2 furnaces blowing the heated steel at the moment. It's approximately about halfway through that heat.
And what's the significance of this place in the steelworks?
We're actually the steel making area, so we get the iron from the blast furnace and we actually convert it to steel here, and then it gets processed through steel treatment and eventually gets cast in the slab of the caster behind us. So in the BOS we've actually poured in anywhere between 65 to 85 tonne of scrap. We then poured iron from the blast furnace on top, and we use an oxylance to basically mix it all up and take the carbon out of the iron. In that process we make it into a grade of steel, and then steel treatment actually fine tune it. They add the micro alloys and that sort of process, and then it goes to the caster and gets cast in the slabs required, the width and the thickness required.
What's your role here? What do you perform in this area?
I'm currently the asset manager for the BOS area, or the steel making area. I've also got the shift maintenance crew as well. And we look after the facilities basically behind me at the moment, and all the units that actually go into making the greater steel.
When did you start at BlueScope and what brought you here?
I started in 1985 as a first year apprentice fitter and turner at the old Steel Haven shops in No. 1 Works. I went through a number of departments on the plant. I was at the plate mill in first year, then the strip mill machine shop. I then progressed to the diesel loco shop and also the tractor shop, which used to be here. And then at one stage I was actually the BOS as an apprentice, and when I finished my time I actually came back to the BOS as a tradesperson. So that was in about 1989. Shortly afterwards I then turned around and got promoted to a technician role. In 94 I got a staff role as a coordinator. From there, out of various positions within the BOS area, and in 2006 I went over to the slab yard as the plant maintenance engineer. And then in 2011 I came back as the asset manager for slab yard, slab handling and cranes, and I did a stint in steel treatment and shift maintenance, and then in 2019 I came to the BOS as the asset manager as well as shift maintenance teams.
So it's fair to say that you have a wealth of experience. You've seen a lot of different things throughout this whole process.
Seen a lot of different things over a lot of times, lots of changes over the period of time, and yeah, it's been very, very good. I've always liked finding out how things work, and the fitter and turner apprenticeship really does that. You've actually got to diagnose, fault find out the problem, and then you need to work out how you're going to rectify. And that's very interesting to me.
And those skills have lasted you throughout your time here?
Yep, it has, and I've also been able to use them to guide and mentor other people as well. With that, I've been lucky enough to be part of the interview process the last couple of years for the apprentices, and what I tell them in that is day one is the first day of your job interview, and the second part is you'll get out of your apprenticeship what you put into it. So if you want to do nothing extra, you'll get nothing out at the end. There's lots of other avenues you can go to. You don't have to stay as a fitter and turner apprenticeship or electrician apprenticeship. You've got a lot of avenues you can go down, or just broaden your knowledge. We've got a number of apprentices actually work with us now, and they start off assisting tradespeople, and by the fourth year I try to actually get them onto shift maintenance for a period of time, just to learn a different aspect of maintenance, because there are different parts. But our apprentices are really good coming through, and I think they've got a lot of knowledge, and they learn that from our tradesmen we mentor them up with.
That brings this episode to a close. Thank you very much to Aidan, Bradley, Naomi and Stuart for sharing their stories with us. Make sure to visit the show notes to find links to further content, including a focus-on video of new apprentices with HVTC and BlueScope who have started their careers with us in 2021. For other news and updates, go to bluescope.com, visit BlueScope on LinkedIn, or follow @BlueScope on Twitter. Thank you for listening to the Voices of BlueScope podcast. Until next time.